Hello, I'm Karen Fraser, State Senator here in the state of Washington. My district is the Olympia-Lacey, Tumwater, North Thurston County area. It's the state capital area, and we're here today to talk about the remarkable story of women getting the right to vote here in the state of Washington 100 years ago.
And I'm Representative Mary Lou Dickerson from the 36th District in Seattle, and I am so pleased that we're going to be able to let people know about this historic vote.
Well, when the Senate is in session, you're as likely to see a woman as a man in any of the seats here. But that wasn't the case 100 years ago. In 1909, women didn't have the right to vote, and of course there were no women in the legislature. But today that has all changed. In our state, we even have the governor and our 2 U.S. senators are women and about a third of the legislature.
You know, we're standing here in the Senate chambers, but the historic vote first took place in the House. And you might say that the action got rolling way before that with the work of May Arkwright Hutton from Spokane and Emma Smith DuVoe from Pierce County, and the work of hundreds of people throughout the counties of Washington. Their work resulted in the vote, the historic vote, that made Washington State the 5th state in the country to enact women's suffrage. And it ignited the movement again, it reignited the movement so that we finally could get suffrage in the United States in 1920.
And it's so expected and normal now for women to be legislators that here in the Senate, the majority of the leadership positions are filled by women. All 3 budget chairs are women. Leadership in caucuses are by women, so women are fully engaged at this time in the legislative branch.
Growth Substitute House Bill 1619.
When Washington took its historic vote, the House and Senate were chambered right here in what today is the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's a great building, and it was our first Capitol building. The legislature was here, and the House chamber was where we're standing, and down the hallway was the Senate chamber.
And this was the scene of incredible lobbying activity as women and men from all over the state came here urging the all-male state legislature to vote to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot giving women the right to vote in all elections. It was a huge campaign, and there was an Olympia headquarters for the campaign very near here. There had been a campaign to get women's right to vote not only since statehood in 1889, but before that, during territorial days. Women had the right to vote a couple of times, but lost it through various court actions. So with the action of the 1909 legislature, and then the approval of the voters in 1910, the all-male voters, I should add, Washington became the 5th state in the nation to give women the right to vote. And through this action by the legislature and the voters, we provided a stimulus for the rest of the country to move ahead and give women the right to vote in other states. And then ultimately, nationally, in 1920, when the amendment to the U.S. Constitution was approved.
And women from Washington, after we passed our own suffrage, went to Washington, D.C., and were very active in the movement back there. Okay, we're going to retrace the steps of the passage of the historic suffrage amendment, and it all started right here on the floor of the House. In 1909, on January 20th, T.J. Bell, who was publisher of the Tacoma News Herald, introduced the legislation. He'd been working with Emma Smith DuVoe and George Cotterell, who was a senator from Seattle, to craft the legislation. The legislation was introduced into the Committee on Constitutional Revisions, but there was a fly in the ointment, and the representative who headed that committee didn't cotton to women's suffrage. And so the bill was re-referred to a more amicable committee and was passed on January 28th out of that committee.
And back in those days, the legislature acted very quickly, so it passed the House, where we're standing now, the current House of Representatives, just the next day. There were arguments on the floor, but it did pass with about more than a 2/3 vote, and it was not party line, but it relied for its passage more on affiliation with progressive issues more than whether you were a member of one party or another.